Imagine a king so powerful that at the age of 70, he still led armies into bloody battles. A man who united tribes, conquered kingdoms, and became a legend. This is Harald Wartooth, the king who conquered Sweden and whose name echoed through the centuries. But who was he? And how did one man achieve such an extraordinary feat? Get ready for an epic journey. In the 8th century, amidst the harsh landscapes of Scandinavia, a time of constant wars and fragile alliances, Harald Wartooth emerged as a figure of extraordinary might. Born into a lineage of legendary kings, he inherited a realm that stretched across Denmark and parts of Norway. But for Harald, this vast territory wasn't enough. His burning ambition was to unify all of Scandinavia under his rule, and Sweden would prove to be one of the greatest challenges of his remarkable career. The stories tell us that Harald's very presence on the battlefield would strike fear into the hearts of his enemies. His warriors spoke of a leader who fought with the strength of 10 men, even in his later years. Some say he was blessed by the Norse gods themselves, while others believed he possessed supernatural powers that kept him young and vigorous well into his old age. Today, we'll embark on an extraordinary journey through time. We'll explore the life of this legendary ruler, uncover the secrets behind his remarkable conquests, and witness the epic battles that defined his reign. From the snow-covered fjords of Norway to the dense forests of Sweden, we'll trace the footsteps of one of history's most fascinating warriors. If you love history and want to unravel the mysteries of the great empires like this video, subscribe to the Medieval Archives and make sure you don't miss a single episode. Join us as we dive deep into the saga of Harald Wartooth, the king who dared to dream of a unified Scandinavia and fought until his last breath to make it reality. Harald Wartooth wasn't just born to wear a crown. He was raised to become one of the greatest conquerors Scandinavia had ever seen. As the son of King Halfdan the Mighty, young Harald grew up in the grand halls of power, surrounded by warriors, strategists, and the epic tales of his ancestors' conquests. But what truly set Harald apart was his extraordinary vision. While other princes were content with learning the basics of warfare, Harald immersed himself in the art of conquest. By the age of 15, he could command troops with the skill of a seasoned general. The old warriors who trained him would often whisper among themselves that they had never seen such natural talent for leadership and battle strategy in someone so young. The legends tell us that Harald had a unique way of uniting people. Where others saw rival tribes and bitter enemies, he saw potential allies. His charisma was said to be so powerful that even his fiercest opponents would often end up becoming his most loyal supporters. He learned the languages and customs of different tribes, showing respect for their traditions while gradually bringing them under his banner. What drove this remarkable man to seek the conquest of Sweden? Some historians believe it was more than just the usual desire for power and territory. Harald was haunted by an ancient prophecy that spoke of a ruler who would unite all the Norse lands under a single crown. He became obsessed with the idea of eternal glory, wanting his name to echo through the ages as the greatest king Scandinavia had ever known. A fascinating detail often overlooked is how Harald used marriage alliances and fosterage to strengthen his position. He would send his most trusted warriors to live among different tribes, learning their ways and gradually winning their loyalty. This intricate web of relationships became the foundation of his future empire, proving that Harald was not just a warrior, but a master of diplomacy as well. The young prince, who began as merely another heir to a powerful kingdom, was transforming into something far more significant, a leader whose ambitions would reshape the entire Nordic world. Harald Wartooth was about to embark on a journey that would turn him into a legend, and Sweden was just the beginning of his grand vision for a unified Scandinavia. The conquest of Sweden was far from a simple task. It was perhaps Harald's greatest challenge yet. Picture Sweden in the 8th century, a vast land divided among dozens of small kingdoms and tribal chieftains, each fiercely protective of their independence and backed by their own armies and alliances. This wasn't just a single kingdom to conquer. It was a complex web of power that Harald would need to carefully unravel. Harald Wartooth approached this challenge with the cunning of a master strategist. He understood that brute force alone wouldn't be enough to unite these proud and independent peoples. Instead, he crafted a brilliant three-pronged strategy. First, he formed strategic alliances through marriage and friendship. Second, he made tantalizing promises of wealth and power to those who would join him willingly. And third, when diplomacy failed, he unleashed the full might of his army with devastating effect. Here's something fascinating about Harald that few people know. He wore a distinctive helmet adorned with the teeth of fierce animals, bears, wolves, and some say even the teeth of mythical beasts. This wasn't just for show. It was a powerful symbol that struck fear into his enemies and inspired his own men. The Norse sagas tell us that when sunlight glinted off those teeth in battle, it created an almost supernatural aura around Harald, making him appear as if blessed by the gods themselves. His tactics in Sweden were nothing short of brilliant. He would often send envoys laden with gifts to potential allies, while simultaneously positioning his troops in strategic locations. Those who accepted his friendship were rewarded with positions of power in his growing empire. Those who refused, well, they soon learned why Harald was called Wartooth. The name itself struck terror. Some say it came from his fierce battle cry. Others believe it was because he fought with the relentless persistence of a growing thorn. But perhaps most remarkable was how Harald maintained his warrior spirit even as age crept up on him. By the time of the decisive battles for Sweden, he was no longer a young man, yet he continued to lead from the front. Imagine the sight. A warrior king in his legendary tooth-adorned helmet, charging into battle atop his warhorse, his white beard flowing in the wind, inspiring thousands of warriors to follow him into combat. The culmination of this massive campaign would come at Bravelir, in what would become one of the bloodiest and most famous battles in all of Scandinavian history. But that's a story that deserves its own telling. A tale of such epic proportions that it would forever change the face of the North. What made Harald's conquest of Sweden truly remarkable wasn't just the military victory. It was how he managed to hold it together afterward. He understood that conquering was one thing, but ruling was another matter entirely. He allowed local chiefs who submitted to him to maintain significant autonomy, as long as they acknowledged his supreme authority. This delicate balance of power would become the foundation of his expanded kingdom, proving that Harald was not just a brilliant warrior, but a shrewd ruler as well. The Battle of Bravelir stands as one of the most extraordinary moments in Norse history. Picture this, a vast plain covered in morning mist, and emerging from that mist, two of the mightiest armies the North had ever seen. On one side stood Harald Wartooth, his legendary tooth-adorned helmet gleaming in the dawn light, leading an army of 40,000 warriors. Facing him was the Swedish king Sigurd Ring, commanding an equally impressive force. The scale of this battle was unprecedented. The Norse sagas tell us that warriors came from all corners of Scandinavia to fight. There were Danish axemen, Norwegian spearmen, Swedish swordsmen, and even warriors from distant lands who had heard tales of the coming clash and wanted to be part of this historic moment. What makes this battle truly remarkable is Harald himself. Despite being well into his 70s, he chose to fight in the front lines. Imagine the sight. An elderly king, his white beard flowing beneath his fearsome helmet, charging into battle atop his warhorse. His presence alone was enough to prevent any of his men from even thinking about retreat. The sagas tell us that his battle cry could be heard above the clash of steel and the screams of dying men. The battle raged for 3 full days. The fighting was so intense that the ground became slick with blood. and the clash of weapons could be heard from miles away. Veteran warriors who survived would later say they had never seen anything like it. The air was thick with arrows, the ground trembled under the charge of thousands of horses, and everywhere you looked, heroes were performing incredible feats of valor. And here's a fascinating detail that often gets overlooked. During the battle, both armies maintained strict formations based on tribal affiliations. Each group fought with their own unique style. The Danes with their signature shield wall, the Norwegians with their berserker charges, and the Swedes with their skilled sword techniques. It was like watching centuries of military tradition clash on a single battlefield. Harald's victory at Bravilir came at a terrible cost. Thousands of warriors fell on both sides, including many of the most renowned champions of the north. The field was littered with broken weapons, shattered shields, and the bodies of the fallen. Even in victory, the kingdom was exhausted, its resources drained, and many of its best warriors lost. The Battle of Bravilir wasn't just a military engagement. It was the kind of battle that storytellers would speak of for generations to come. It marked the moment when Harald Wartooth truly became a legend, not just a king. And speaking of legends, did you know about Harald's famous helmet decorated with animal teeth? If you're enjoying this incredible tale of conquest and courage, make sure to like this video and subscribe to the Medieval Archives for more amazing historical stories. And here's a question for you. Who do you think was the greatest conqueror in history? Share your thoughts in the comments below. After conquering Sweden, Harald Wartooth transformed from a mere king into something far more powerful, a living legend. His name was whispered with awe in great halls from Denmark to the farthest reaches of Norway. Children would play at being Harald in their games, and poets would compete to compose the most stirring verses about his deeds. What made Harald's legacy truly remarkable was how he changed the very idea of kingship in Scandinavia. Before him, the north was a patchwork of competing tribes and petty kingdoms. After Harald, people began to dream of something greater, a unified Scandinavia. His success proved that the seemingly impossible task of uniting these fierce, independent peoples could actually be achieved. The impact of his reign would echo through generations. The great Ragnar Lodbrok, whose own saga would become legendary, was said to have been inspired by tales of Harald's conquests. Young princes would study his strategies, trying to understand how he managed to hold together such a vast kingdom of proud and warlike peoples. But perhaps the most fascinating aspect of Harald's legacy is how he chose to end it. Unlike many rulers who died in their beds, Harald remained true to his warrior spirit until the very end. According to the sagas, when he felt death approaching, he refused to succumb to old age. Instead, he led one final glorious charge into battle, his legendary tooth-adorned helmet gleaming in the sun one last time. Here's a remarkable detail that speaks volumes about his character. Harald had his funeral pyre prepared before his final battle. He gave instructions that if he fell, he should be burned with all his weapons and his favorite warhorse, ensuring he would enter Valhalla as a true warrior. This wasn't just dramatic flair. It was a powerful message to his people about honor, courage, and the proper way for a king to meet his fate. The stories of Harald Wartooth didn't end with his death. They grew. Skalds and poets would gather in mead halls across Scandinavia, composing elaborate verses about his deeds. They sang of how he could split a shield with a single blow, how he could inspire an army with just a glance, and how even the gods themselves respected his warrior spirit. His influence extended far beyond military matters. Harald's system of governance, his methods of maintaining peace between different tribes, and his way of balancing central authority with local autonomy became a model for future rulers. Even today, historians study his techniques for managing such a vast and diverse kingdom. But perhaps Harald's greatest legacy was the dream he left behind, the vision of a unified North. Though his empire would eventually fragment, the idea he planted would never truly die. For centuries afterward, ambitious rulers would look to his example, dreaming of reuniting the lands that Harald once held under his legendary crown. In many ways, the modern Nordic nations still carry echoes of the unity that Harald Wartooth first imagined over 1,000 years ago. While the sagas sing of Harald Wartooth's battlefield glory, there's another side to his story that's equally fascinating: the dangerous world of court intrigue and political manipulation that surrounded him. Behind the walls of his great halls, Harald fought battles just as treacherous as any he faced with sword and shield. One of the most compelling stories from these hidden struggles involves his own flesh and blood. The sagas tell us of Harald's son, whose name has been deliberately obscured in many historical accounts, who grew increasingly jealous of his father's power and fame. While Harald was away fighting his campaigns, this ambitious prince began weaving a web of alliances, promising land and titles to those who would support his claim to the throne. The medieval courts were dangerous places, filled with whispered conversations and secret meetings. Harald had to maintain an extensive network of loyal informants just to stay alive. It's said he never ate or drank anything that hadn't been tested first, and he kept a circle of 12 trusted warriors who took turns guarding his sleeping quarters. These weren't signs of paranoia. They were necessary precautions in a world where poison and midnight assassinations were common political tools. Here's a fascinating detail that shows Harald's political genius. He developed a unique system of rotating advisors from different tribes and regions. This not only helped him keep an eye on potential troubles brewing in various parts of his kingdom, but also made it harder for any single group to plot against him. He would often play rival factions against each other, ensuring that no one became powerful enough to challenge his authority. The story of his son's betrayal reached its climax during a midwinter feast. According to the sagas, the prince had planned to have his father assassinated during the celebrations, when guard would be down and mead would be flowing freely. But Harald had already learned of the plot. In a masterful display of political theatre, he confronted his son publicly, not with accusations, but with a challenge, to prove his worth through honorable combat rather than treachery. This moment reveals much about Harald's character. Instead of having his son executed, as many rulers would have done, he chose a path that would maintain the stability of his kingdom while dealing with the threat. The prince, faced with his father's wisdom and mercy, is said to have fallen to his knees in shame, begging forgiveness. But not all threats came from within his family. Harald also faced challenges from powerful jarls and chieftains who resented his growing power. Some would pledge loyalty to his face while secretly plotting against him. Others would try to turn his allies against him through bribes or threats. Harald handled these situations with a combination of diplomatic skill and, when necessary, swift and decisive action. The political landscape of 8th century Scandinavia was like a deadly game of chess, where one wrong move could mean disaster. Harald's ability to navigate these treacherous waters while building and maintaining his empire shows that he was more than just a warrior. He was a master of statecraft who understood that sometimes the most dangerous battles are fought not with swords, but with words and wit. As our journey through the epic saga of Harald Wartooth comes to an end, we're left with a profound question to ponder. Was he merely a king? No, Harald Wartooth represented something far greater. He embodied the raw ambition, unwavering courage, and iron determination that defined an entire era of Nordic history. His conquest of Sweden wasn't just another military campaign inscribed in the dusty pages of history books. It was a transformative moment that reshaped the entire landscape of Scandinavia. Through blood, steel, and wisdom, Harald forged a legacy that would echo through the centuries, inspiring generations of leaders who came after him. But here's the fascinating question that continues to spark debate among historians and history enthusiasts alike. Was Harald Wartooth truly a hero, or was he a tyrant cloaked in glory? The answer isn't as simple as it might seem. While some celebrate him as the unifier who dared to dream of a united Scandinavia, others point to the countless lives lost in his pursuit of power. Perhaps the truth lies somewhere in between. Like many great figures of history, Harald Wartooth was neither purely hero nor purely villain. He was a man of his time, shaped by the harsh realities of the 8th century, driven by ambition and guided by his own vision of greatness. What do you think? Was the price of unity and progress worth the cost in human lives? How would you judge a leader who brought both tremendous change and tremendous suffering? Share your thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to hear your perspective on this fascinating historical figure. If you've enjoyed this deep dive into the life of one of history's most remarkable warrior kings, don't forget to hit that like button and share this video with your friends who love history as much as you do. And make sure you're subscribed to the Medieval Archives. We have many more incredible stories from the ancient world coming your way. This has been the tale of Harald Wartooth, the king who dared to dream of a unified Scandinavia. Until next time, keep exploring the fascinating world of ancient history.